You're listening to Colorado Chamber Office Hours, a podcast that explores what matters most to business. I'm your host, Ed Sealover, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for the Colorado Chamber of Commerce and editor of the Sum and Substance. Let's get talking. Welcome back to another episode of Colorado Chamber Office Hours. With the legislative session really kicking into gear this week, we want to highlight what the biggest issues will be for business leaders to watch over the next few months. And to do that today, I have brought on to the show Meghan Dollar, the Senior Vice President of Governmental Relations for the Colorado Chamber of Commerce. And I know some of you may be thinking, wait, Ed, your special guest is the woman who has the office right next to you? And yes, I realize I will be interviewing one of my coworkers today. But Meghan, for those of you who don't know her, is one of the most respected lobbyists at the Colorado Capitol, and I would argue the one who knows the single most about the business environment in this state. So in the interest of bringing you the most in-depth and informed conversations on legislative business issues, I thought it best to bring on the foremost expert in this sector. Even if I just had to yell through our shared wall, hey, Meghan, it's time to tape the podcast. So, Meghan, welcome to Colorado Chamber Office Hours. How are you doing, and are you ready for what is about to come over the next 4 months?
Thank you for having me, Ed. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Am I ready for the 2026 legislative session? No. You're never totally ready. This will be my 15th session, and what we do know is that it will always change, and you got to expect the unexpected. So I assume we'll do that again in 2026.
Well, we're going to try to look into a crystal ball here and figure out what exactly could be expected. But let's level set to start this conversation. Before we talk about what's coming at the Gold Dome, let's reflect on what happened last year, or more appropriately, over the two different sessions that took place in 2025. Meghan, what was the big picture impact to business of these sessions? And where do business leaders stand now in terms of their ability to operate without excessive costs and regulations in this state?
I want to point out to the Colorado Chamber's bill, Senate Bill 25306. That was priority legislation, and we feel like that is going to go far for companies in Colorado. This was a response to a lot of the research we've done in the regulatory environment, and what that bill does specifically is create auditing opportunities for the state auditor to look at specific divisions, both in CDPHE as well as CDLE, that have kind of an exorbitant amount of regulations. And so we're hopeful that that will be really helpful legislation. Additionally, I think the business community was able to stave off a lot of legislation with like taxes and fees that really would have increased the cost of doing business.
Yeah, I agree. That was the last session was one in which it seemed like there was a lot of survival instincts that went into it.
That's right.
This is going to be a broad question as we're looking at this session, but as we look at this, what do you think are going to be the one or two business issues that we're going to be discussing the most between now and the May 13th adjournment of the session?
If only there were only one or two. I mean, I think we're going to see a lot. I would start out the budget issues that the state is having will impact businesses, whether that's through a tax policy or attempts to increase fees on businesses. I think that will be something we see in 2026. The Labor Peace Act as we worked on in 2025 is also going to be returning in 2026. And I think that will be a hotly talked about issue. And then, of course, artificial intelligence and the regulatory regime or potential regulatory regime around that.
You know, that's one of the buzzwords that everyone is talking about right now, artificial intelligence. And I want to talk more about that. A governor-created task force is working diligently right now to create the details of a bill that could regulate the development and employment of AI in a way that's acceptable to both tech companies and to civil rights advocates. And I don't think I want to try to guess what those details are going to be. But in general, what are the principles that business leaders need to see in this bill to strike the balance of allowing for innovation and job growth in the sector while still protecting state residents from potential algorithmic discrimination?
Those discussions are ongoing. I don't know that decision has been officially made. As you know, our president and CEO, Lauren Furman, is serving on the governor's work group as a business representative. And so I know she's working diligently to bring the business community together so that we're all on the same page. There's certainly conversations happening around disclosures and discrimination and what can be done there, certainly to clarify the law and potentially make it stronger. The liability discussion is really going to be the key issue going into 2026, or now that we're in 2026, I should say. And so that's something that we're going to be watching really closely and working hard to balance that.
And Megan, I don't want this point to get lost because some people might listen to this might think, well, I don't work for an AI developer, so this doesn't apply to me. But that conversation affects far more industries than just big tech, right?
Absolutely. You may not be a developer, but you could very well be a deployer, right? And so hospitals, manufacturers, any employer that uses AI in their hiring processes, this will impact you.
AI regulations. Stay tuned, everyone. And while we are talking very specifically about AI regulations, I also know that business leaders want the legislature to step back and reconsider the wide range of regulations that they operate under in every industry right now. In fact, a study commissioned by our organization at the end of 2024 showed that Colorado is the sixth most regulated state in the country, with nearly 200,000 rules in place. Governor Polis has talked about wanting to limit or even roll back regulations. Megan, is there going to be a push this year to do that in some way?
Absolutely, there will be, and it'll be led by the chamber, the State Chamber of Commerce. We have priority legislation that we plan to run this year. And, the numbers that you cited are real, Ed. We're in a very difficult business climate. And so and it's impacting jobs in Colorado, actually, I should add. So there needs to be more transparency and streamlining in Colorado's regulatory environment, and we want to lead legislation on that.
Is there a particular way that legislation could attack regulations?
Yes. Our hope is that we beef up existing law around transparency for rules and regulations that's currently done by the Department of Regulatory Agencies, potentially apply that law to other agencies, state departments, I should say, and provide more transparency and an opportunity to really see if there's duplication among regulations in the state.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And regulations, of course, drive up the cost of doing business. But you know what else does? Fees and taxes. And to balance the budget during the summer session last year, legislators rolled back 5 tax breaks, which saved the state and cost business owners a cumulative $153.2 million. I won't go into all of them. They involve things like insurance companies losing a substantial tax break when they had a big percentage of their workforce here in Colorado, and retail businesses not being able to take discounts anymore for calculating and remitting their taxes. The important thing, though, is I hear that legislators are still looking at more ways to potentially balance the budget through more tax break rollbacks. What's an issue this year, Megan? What are we hearing, and what could these things mean to businesses?
Well, I think it goes back to the original comment I made on taxes and fees generally, and how much that impacts business. We've got reason to believe, based on the budget discussions that are going on now, that there will be tax policy changes, or at least attempts, in order to raise revenue for the state. I've heard anything from allowing the taxation of downloadable software to removing the 80-20 rule here in Colorado, which essentially sets out different tax brackets for companies that are 80% outside of the state. So it'll impact a lot of our members. Still looking into that and really looking at the potential impacts, but we are very concerned with the state's interest in kind of using this to raise revenue.
Let's talk about something else that could have a lot of impact on costs, and that is a plan that Governor Polis has floated for quite a while to make utilities reach net zero in their climate impacts by 2040. This is a high-level issue, but one that affects far more than just utilities. Megan, what's being discussed here, and what's it really at issue about this?
It's ebbing and flowing right now. The legislation is, certainly the goal, I believe, of the governor, because he did campaign on this, as well as the the department, the Colorado Energy Office, I should say, is to get 100% renewable by 2040. Whether or not that's what they will eventually propose or what they are going to propose, I'm not sure. I would just say that our biggest concerns, having members in so many different areas of different sectors and industries, we have mining companies, we have utilities, we have lots of different options there. Our main drivers, our main concerns are going to be keeping energy affordable, keeping it reliable, and making sure that the grid has redundancies and is protected. And so that's our main issue. And there is some debate on whether or not that's possible with a 2040 100% standard.
I want to hit one more topic here with you. Every year features the return of bills that didn't make it across the finish line the year before, and I'm pretty sure that 2026 will be no exception. Megan, we could spend an entire episode talking about only those sequel bills, and several of them are going to merit some pretty deep conversations. But for today's purposes, I want to focus on one returning bill in particular because it came and went so quickly during the 2025 session that I don't think people really had the opportunity to understand how consequential it could be. This is the Extreme Temperatures Bill, a proposal that would put a lot of regulations onto employers whose workers labor outside when temperatures dip below 30 degrees or rise above 80 degrees. Just to cite one provision of last year's bill, which sponsors killed in its first committee because of lack of support, employers would have to provide at least 32 ounces of drinkable water per hour, chilled to no less than 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Megan, what is happening with this bill, and why should employers care, just in case that lead-in didn't get them excited?
The specificity is appreciated, Ed, because that was a point an issue that I pointed to a lot in 2025. So yeah, we do expect that bill to come back. I mean, the sponsors have reached out to business, which we appreciate, as well as the proponents. Unfortunately, I think that there still may be an impasse when we're talking about specifically regulating and looking at how each employer has and their relationship with the employees. It's extremely specific, and frankly, for us, we believe it's redundant because there are protections already in law in the Department of Labor and Employment, as well as OSHA standards on the federal level. And so, if we kind of came to the table, and will continue to say so, that if we want to talk about best practices, I think that's a worthy conversation to have, and many of our members would like to, show some of their programs and show what they do. But a full, specific, full regulatory mechanism where employers are getting sued for, potentially not having the temperature of water correct is really problematic for employers.
Understandable. Last one, full grab bag for you. What's a bill that we haven't talked about that you think businesses will really want to watch in the coming months?
I think in the energy sector, we're going to see a lot of debate and legislation again outside of 2040. We're going to see, some transparency requirements potentially for companies to show their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. There's always air quality discussions. So I think those are ones that we expect. One other piece of legislation, of course, the Labor Peace Act, as well, as I mentioned earlier. And then one other piece that I think, and I'm not positive of what the Colorado Chamber's role will be in that, but the PUC sunset is going to have a lot of parties interested in it, whether it's from the utility aspect or the TNC, Transportation Network Company aspect. That's going to be one that has a lot of debate, in my opinion.
I agree. And quite frankly, I think we're going to be coming back to talk about a lot of these in greater depth as the session goes along. So stay tuned, everyone. Megan, thank you for sitting down with me today to discuss the biggest issues that are expected to come up in the 2026 legislative session. And good luck trying to keep up with all of them in the next 4 months.
I appreciate the good luck. Thank you.
That's it for our interview segment. Now let's take a quick look at what you need to know about the week ahead. Well, as I've mentioned before, this week is setting up to be an in-between week as far as legislative action goes. Bills are getting introduced fairly quickly with the session underway, but for the most part, hearings on legislative proposals won't start until next week. So then what's this week about? Well, it's an opportunity for legislators to hear from leaders on Colorado's 21 different state departments about what they're doing, and particularly what they're doing to implement recently enacted state laws at what are called SMART Act hearings. And while these aren't for everyone, you admittedly have to be a little bit of a policy nerd like I am to truly appreciate such discussions, there are some that I'll be watching that others may want to watch as well. Now, the Capitol will be closed Monday for Martin Luther King Day, but when legislators return on Tuesday, the joint House and Senate Transportation Committees will get their SMART Act hearings that morning. They'll hear, among other things, from the Colorado Department of Transportation, which is likely to field questions from Democrats on its efforts to grow transit and electric vehicle infrastructure, and from Republicans on how it's going with repairing roadways and moving forward on the widening of I-70 through the Floyd Hill area. On Friday, meanwhile, the joint House and Senate Housing Committees will have their SMART Act hearing, and given all the bills that Governor Polis pushed through in the past two sessions to try to spur construction of affordable housing, you can bet there will be a lot of questions around how that is working. We're also hoping to get details as well on whether the construction defects reform bill that Polis signed last year is creating any movement whatsoever toward construction of more condominiums, as that new build market is essentially non-existent now, in part because of lawsuits against builders. One other interesting hearing comes Tuesday afternoon when the Joint Budget Committee will meet with the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing, which oversees Medicaid. Polis has proposed Medicaid spending reductions that are responsible for filling roughly a third of the $800 million budget shortfall that the state faces this year. But legislators from both parties are expressing anxiety about what the cuts could do, particularly to rural hospitals and healthcare providers, so this will serve as a chance to examine those proposals more deeply. With that said, maybe the most interesting thing that will happen on the floors of the House and Senate this week will be the continued introduction of bills. Now, if you missed it, a total of 94 bills got read across on the first day, Wednesday. And I want to just focus in the rest of this section on a couple of those that you may want to get to know, because we'll be talking about them over and over again this session. There are 5 bills in particular I want to alert you to. First one up is House Bill 1012. Now, a year ago, Governor Polis signed a significantly scaled-back bill that expanded the definition of price gouging during declared disasters. This year, proponents have come back with a whole new target, what they call captive consumers. Those people at places like airports, hospitals, outdoor festivals, and event venues who don't have the ability to shop around for better prices. What HB 1012 would do is define prices in such locations as being excessive if a vendor charges more than the average cost of a good or service in that county. Now, that's a low bar, as vendors usually have to pay significant fees to operate in these locations, and they raise prices to recoup the costs. Violations would be considered an unfair or deceptive trade practice, punishable by civil legal actions that can carry with them a pretty high price tag. A second bill you're going to want to know about is House Bill 1030. This is a bill that would about a topic that everyone seems to want to talk about, data centers. It would create a 100% state sales and use tax exemption for data centers for 20 years if they meet minimum investment and job creation thresholds and secure power from a utility. This is just the first salvo in the discussion about data centers, though, as we're expecting another bill to come fairly quickly that's going to make it quite hard to build data centers, with rules including that they have to get 100% of their power from renewable energy sources. But that's going to be a debate we're going to watch all year long. Third are a pair of bills I want to bring up on childcare. Now, you might say, childcare, is that really a business topic, Ed? Yes. Colorado's dearth of childcare facilities, which have an estimated shortage of 75,000 slots right now, cost the state about $2.2 billion each year in economic development because they don't allow caregivers, primarily women, to return to the workforce when they're ready. And so several bipartisan bills are seeking to address that this year. One of them, HB 1004, would extend through 2038 a 50% income tax credit for contributions made to childcare facilities. And another one, SB 20, that's the Senate Bill 20, would reform several childcare facility regulations, including streamlining the licensure system and allowing centers to open for as long as 9 months, even when they're facing disputes from local governments over just zoning and licensing issues. A fourth bill I want to highlight, Senate Bill 22. This is a bill all about energy affordability. It would allow municipal utilities and cooperative electric associations to submit plans of the state that would extend their deadline to reduce their emissions 80% if they're unable to hit that goal by 2030. Now, this is a big deal. Bipartisan backers are behind this. This is typically a Republican subject, but Democrats are jumping on board too because they say the bill is needed to balance environmental goals with affordability. However, some environmental groups say, no, this is pushing us farther from reaching our goals, and that is not something we should be doing. Finally, the last bill I want to highlight that was introduced on day one is HB 1005. And this is the bill to try again to remove the second election required for union security under Colorado's Unique Labor Peace Act. This is the law that says if you're going to unionize a workplace, you have to have two elections. One, to get at least a majority of your workplace to say, we're going to unionize, and a second to get 75% of that workplace to agree that unions will be able to take negotiating fees directly from the paychecks of workers, whether or not they vote to unionize. This bill comes after Polis vetoed a similar measure last year, and opponents say they haven't really changed up a lot. They just want the governor to think differently about it. It's going to be an interesting debate once again, but really a debate that's being held not so much for this governor, who's likely to veto it if it comes again to his desk, but for whoever succeeds the term-limited Polis in 2027. That's all for this episode of Colorado Chamber Office Hours. Once again, I'm Ed Seelover, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for the Colorado Chamber of Commerce and editor of the Sum and Substance. I'll keep the conversation going at tsscolorado.com, and we'll see you next time as we explore the issues that matter most to business.